To continue in our evening's micro theme of React, we're now going to look at the newest evolution of React, React Native, with one of Atlassian's new sons here. Can we please welcome Rob to the stage?
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? I'm trying a new mic. Yeah, thumbs up from the back. That's a good thing. All right. Yes, there's another React talk because I heard it's React Night. I'm going to break my talk into 3 different parts. I've got the intro, talk about myself, JavaScript plus functional programming for anyone that didn't know what FP stood for, plus iOS, which is something Apple related. And that's just basically me talking. And then number 3 is I'm going to try and break into a demo of something I built on my phone. So intro, my name is Smiley Rob. I work here at Atlassian. I'm an overexcited grad. I started about 4 months ago. And I'm getting head shakes from fellow Atlassians. And one thing I like to do is, during these talks, is do selfies. I do them all the time. So I'm just going to do one quickly now. Can I get everyone's hands in the air, like really excited, like, it's Rob. I've got my camera on. Hands in the air, like seriously. Yeah. Oh, let me turn my camera around. So much excitement. Keep it up. Yep. Okay. Hey, yeah, excellent. One of those will work. Okay, excellent. You've all been great. Thank you very much. No. Okay. So I'm RJ Chatfield everywhere. My slides are online. My code is good lights. My code is online, and my slides are as well. If you even care, that's my intro. So let's talk about JavaScript. I'm not going to talk very long about this because we're SydJS, but I just want to say JavaScript is the good bit of what I want to talk about. Everything else about working with the web is what I want to complain about and what React solves and how they applied that to iOS. I'm getting some head nods at the front. That's a good thing. Okay, so functional programming, like I said, I'm a grad and I studied functional programming in my degree, and I absolutely love it. I do really think that it could improve our productivity and engineering health. And so some things I want to talk about specifically. Oh, who here calls themselves a functional programmer? Just so I can gauge the audience. There's 2 people. Excellent. So I'll be shamed by those 2 people. And I want to remind you all that you're all functional programmers, kind of. Anyone that's done a callback or a promise is doing functional programming. But I want to focus on 4 main things. First is a type system. I wish we had a type system in JS that was anywhere as good as other languages. Second one is immutability. Persistent data structures, complicated arrays, sets, maps, all those sorts of things. I wish we had that. Purity. When it comes to applications, purity, functional purity is about passing in arguments and getting a predictable deterministic outcome. And then you pass in the same arguments and you get the exact same outcome. And nothing else in the system gets touched. And if you have this purity in your functions, you can compose them together. This is just basic FP 101, but purity is a concept that I wish we had. And if we had all of these things, types, immutability, purity, we can become declarative. And declarative means what I say my code wants to be doing is exactly what I can test it, I can property test it, and what goes to production is what's really happening. And if I have a bug in production, and that means I've declared a bug, and I should be able to find it in test. So these 4 things I think are important properties of functional programming. And there's a software engineering team, or company, software engineering company over in the States. They do data mining, sell off personal data. They worked on 4 really big frameworks, right? Yeah, cool. So Facebook released a thing called Flow, solving the type system problem. Has anyone here heard of Flow, Flow type? Excellent. Anyone that has a Twitter has heard of it. Amazing system. I don't want to talk too much about it. I could do a whole talk on it. Immutable JS, persistent data structures, that's sets, maps, lists, collections, records that give you trust, scalability, as far as performance gains as well. Again, I could do a whole talk on that. Flux. Now, Flux was to talk about purity. If you have just a function that receives arguments and spits out code, then you kind of need to write your architecture, your application architecture in a certain way. So this is not really anything but boilerplate or an idea of how to structure your code in a way that you can be pure as well as get an interactive application. And then the crown on the jewel is React.js. So that's JavaScript is great. functional programming, these things have been around for a long time, and a company over in the US has solved them and brought them to the web. And then there's iOS, which I am an Apple fanboy. Good to see some MacBooks here today and some Apple Watches earlier. I want to talk about declarativity because over at this software engineering company over in the States, they invented and open sourced a thing called Component Kit, giving declarativity to iOS programming. It's written in Objective-C++, so who wants to touch that? But then somewhere in another building in the same software engineering company, they invented this React.js thing, right? And they have a lot of JavaScript programmers. They have a lot of effort going into their type systems and everything else I just mentioned. But then they have this other thing. They're kind of trying to solve the same problem, but they've got two different ways of approaching it. So JavaScript everywhere. Let's move towards who knows what Facebook will do, but I want to show how they're going to be able to do JavaScript everywhere. So anyone that's learnt JavaScript can use it here in an iPhone. But the better bit is it's not just a wrapper for HTML code, right? Has everyone seen this? It's not just PhoneGap, right? And it's not just a wrapper for other HTML. You're not shoehorning a bad experience into a native client. You're building a native client with the technology and software engineering skills that you already have. And I like this. I like this as far as everything that I don't want to get into this debate, but web apps, right? Everything you love about that is that you can write it once and it scales everywhere, right? You have these skills and platforms are changing and such, and you can kind of write once and it runs everywhere with responsive and all those sorts of cool techniques. And then the iOS guys or native guys are loving the customer experience that it delivers. Well, this is kind of like the mixture of both. You can apply all the same techniques on all these platforms and deliver native experiences everywhere. So I think that's pretty important. So JavaScript is an awesome language. Yay, functional programmers. Functional programming, there was 4 things that Facebook solved, as well as wrapping it up in a testing framework called Jest. And then they applied all those learnings and developed a framework that works on iOS. So I hope that wasn't too deep dive. I had to cut a lot of slides because I like talking about functional programming. I want to do a demo of this. So in the topic of talking about React Native, I'm a JIRA dev, and I'm only new here, and I want to learn the APIs, so I'm going to build JIRA Native. It basically looks like this. This is some screenshots. So over on the left, you have like a project list. You tap on any one of those, you come to anyone that uses JIRA, then you get the sidebar. You tap on issues, you see an issue list, and you tap on the issue and you get the details on the right. Does everyone following on along here? So there's navigation. This is all native iOS, basically, except for this last screen. This is actually a web wrapper. So we've already developed, actually, Gil has already developed this, this web version of JIRA. So I'm reusing it. Hey, thumbs up. I'm reusing this, but wrapping it in a better experience everywhere else. Right? So yeah, this is already done for me, but everything else I'm doing for them. So just to get some terminology, if you didn't pick it up before, each one of those is called a component, and they pass the properties into the next thing. So you pick the project, that passes the project key into the next, and the next, and the next. Then if you just think at a higher level, you've got all these components that receive properties and spit out a component. If you pass in different properties, it spits out a different component. So how do you make them interactive if they're not in charge of the properties that are passed to them? So by clicking on anything in a component, you pass that off to what's called actions that can touch the network, that can do all sorts of things, fetching data. Once you've got that data and handled any errors, then that passes it up to a store. That store is then doing the caching and the storing and basically in a pure way, taking that data, storing it, and giving it to the components, and that is the circle of life, right? That's how you build apps in Flux and React and especially in React Native. So components talk to actions, then they go back to sleep. Actions wake up, they do their thing, they pass it to store and go back to sleep. And stores wake up when they receive data, they store it, and then they pass it down into components. And that's how we do things. Well, that's how I've done things. So let's get into a real demo. Should plug my selfie device into here. see if this comes alive. All right, can everyone see my phone over on the right-hand side? So this is actually my phone on here. And just down in the bottom right-hand corner, I've made a JIRA app. Can everyone see this? Cool. And I'll see if it's not already loaded. That's good. Okay, so you saw there was a splash screen, so it's a native app. It's not like a web wrapper that goes and fetches things. There was a bit of a loading screen while that initial downloading is coming. So this screen itself has two different states. Am I loading, or do I have data? Right, assuming you have projects and such. Now this is an iOS app. I can scroll up and down. Let me come back up to the top. I'm just going to use a test and going to tap on Angry Nerds. Cool. So navigation, I can slowly swipe back if I wanted to. Tap on that, tap on issues, and then I get this nice scrolling list. Now this is fetching the state of all of them, saying it's a low priority and a bug. All those sorts of things are dynamically rendered. And as I'm scrolling down, who here's done native iOS development? Right? Yeah. Okay. Cool. About a quarter of the crowd. So you have to say you have a table view, and then you have to say, when I have an index for blah, tell me where to fetch the data from and what view to render, and then it has to basically mutate a lot. And then the next function might go and mutate it a little bit further, and the next function goes and mutates it further. The next fun thing is that you might have a row in Interface Builder that you say, I want it to look like this. But then you go and write some code over here that says, no, but if it's this, then hide this thing. And if it's this, then change that to the other thing. And if it's this, if it's unread, then bold it. And you have to write all this mutating code, and the source of truth is gone. You've got all these different bits of code touching what's rendered here. So it's very easy to get bugs. But with this, I just have one file that tells me how to render a row. And then I just pass a giant JSON array to this, and it renders perfectly. There's no counting indexes and such. I've just passed one array in here. I think I've actually got, or do I? I actually have the code here, but we won't go to that until later. And then the last thing is, if I go all the way to the top, if you don't know about JIRA.Atlassian.com. It's just our bug tracker as well as a lot of test cases. So someone's just trolled our website. So if you want to know about Indianapolis500live.com, you certainly can. So, and I've got my web experience here is what I want to demonstrate here. So full descriptions of all the trolling comments. There you go. If you need the URL 700 times, it's all there, right? So, and I didn't have to do any effort here because that's already been done before, but I've wrapped it, as I said before, in a native iOS component. And if I tap on it again, because it's local, I've already got this data. It's fetched that from the store. An action is in the background trying to fetch the latest update, and it will just draw it over the top. And because this is all happening in a background thread, this is happening. You could be scrolling, and it could be updating this in real time. So declarative as well as fast is a pretty good experience. And it's all JavaScript. Now, anyone with a keen eye has seen a pretty dodgy tab bar across the bottom. I do have other tabs, but I couldn't get that to work, and more stuff goes here, so I kind of stopped. But it was more about just building something from scratch and seeing that flow through and writing it in this declarative, pure way. I don't know if I have time to show off any of this code, but there's a constructor, there's a component did mount, and it adds a listener. Component will unmount, and a render that just says, when I go and get all these issues, go and pass it into this, go and render this React component. Right? That's all that's going on here. Fetch some data and render it. You can see I've either fetching some data or an empty state, and it just passes that in. And that's all that needs to happen. I can property test this till the cows come home. And then on the next layer down on project list, I can sort of, if past certain states, if we'll receive new components, new properties, then go and render it again, and I can test that component works. And I get that separation of what's rendering and what's fetching, and it's very easy to test and extend later. So I hope that was clear. I wanted to fetch some questions if we have time. I don't know how. No, we don't have time. No, it don't stop. Okay, well, that's nice. So does anyone have any questions about React or React Native or anything I just showed there up the corner?
So one of the interesting things about React for the web is that you can use the virtual DOM on your server and write unit tests and components.
Right.
Same thing with React Native.
So you can still get your components running in JavaScript, but you don't have a query string to test on. So yeah, I don't know. Like as far as in any of your renders, I don't know how that would play out. So. You can use Jest and mocks. So Jest is basically Jasmine, but everything is auto-mocked. And then, yes, you can mock your incomings, but the calling of your children? Yes. So you can property test your component, not to say that it renders a DOM element, but you can say, yeah, does if I get passed in these properties, do I call the children components? Let me hide here. This guy. Right? So when render gets called, does project list get passed in these properties? And because every single component is isolated in that way, if I get past these props up in the constructor, do I render something else? So essentially, you don't have to render the whole DOM to be able to test this. You can isolate these down into the components, and that's that purity and declarativity that you can start to compose these into other pieces. So do you use React at the moment? No. Okay. All right. Oh, there's a heckler at the back. Yes. Oh, excellent. I'm honoured.
How do you actually package it to get it into an IPA to put onto an iDevice?
Pardon? Oh, how do I?
Yeah, like, what's the build step?
Oh, okay. So here's one I prepared earlier. So everyone will notice that I had Sublime open and I have my whole folder structure in the side here. When you go React Native, you create, it pulls down this basically from NPM, basically. And you start writing all the JavaScript. Then you switch over to, I should just do this live, because there's nothing wrong with doing that, right? Oh, come on, everyone knows the rule. He's opened with that. Okay, so what happened is I've got Xcode. It launches a terminal instance and jumps into npm start, which boots up like Babel and a hosting server, and then runs up the iOS emulator and points it to localhost so that it's fetching from here. So as I make changes, is that what you do? To say that navigate, I don't even know how I would change this. Let's go. Yeah. How could I make this any actually worse? Touchable highlight. Let's just delete all of this because that doesn't matter. Change the color. Color overlay. Oh, yeah, that'll work. Have we got enough there? Oh. Color. Oh, so when I click it, should go black, right? So anyone that's done iOS development, that's not the fun thing. Let's go change our styles. Flexbox, huh? A non-shit implementation of Flexbox. That's kind of cool. The key color, let's make that just red. Right? And I can Command S, and as soon as it saves, like we're all used to as web devs, but this doesn't have to recompile. This is just fetching a new, it just does, you can even do React hot loader, which will hot swap it in place. But now I've changed these all to, not that you can see that very well. Let's try and make text really, really big. Or not. Empty state? No, I don't really care about that. So it has some sort of implementation. You can see this is stylesheets.create. So you create a JSON object. It's not cascading style sheets, which is awesome. You don't have that whole, if you declare it here and then declare it later and then declare it later, which one wins? And then just JavaScript it later because YOLO. You can, what is it? Font size equals 100, 180. Save that. And yeah, excellent. And I get cool performance as well. That's a nice thing. So you declare a CSS style. This is just an object that can be extended later. So if you want to have cascading, you can intentionally fetch a less file, compile it, and pass it as a property to the next component. If you want all the components to have it, you can intentionally state it that way. There is actually a React component that takes a less file, compiles it, and gives it to, it makes it a stylesheet.create, which is quite powerful, I think. So, and all this style sheet does is takes this object, or all of that as an object, and does a type check over the top of it. So it uses flow and gives you type errors depending on if you've used the wrong thing, like padding horizontal. I've spelled a million times wrong. It'll get you right. Or if you do a dash or something thinking it's actual CSS, then it'll slap you on the wrist. And another thing on slapping on the wrist, like React has to parse over your code before it hands it off to the client. So things like using for of, which you should never do, or for-ofing over an object. You don't know the order of them. So I had this with, this is a horrible page. Let's just comment out that bad boy and save it. So with this, I had a key value pair, like a JSON object, and I was using underscore to map over it to parse it into something that it could use, and underscore uses for of on objects when you try and map over them. So I got all these errors down in Xcode saying, whoa, buddy, don't use for of, right? Like it's giving you, it can look over your code and check out for accessibility problems, saying that like this image tag doesn't have an alt tag and a title and such. So for readability and accessibility, you're breaking rules here. So a lot of people can get into trouble if you don't meet accessibility standards. So does that answer your question on how does it start? Wow, did I know? Yeah, you Command R and you Command S. That's.
Is it using Webpack? Running NPM and a web server on your phone?
No, this is not running on my phone. This is just running locally on my machine.
So how do you get it to your phone?
That was the question, and I'll pay you that. So in I don't know. Can anyone read that? No one can read that. Let's go to something that has presentation. There's like a presentation large. Hey yo. Because good. Okay, so for loading, so you just go Command R, and if it doesn't pick up an instance that's running on the right port, it will spin up npm start and start a server locally on my machine. But what I can do is create, like pre-compile all that JavaScript, save it into a file, and then run it locally, or then take that bundle and ship it onto my phone, and that's how I've been demoing it today. So I've already got like a pre-compiled JavaScript file and running on this. You can also change this localhost to be any IP address. That's also another thing I really, really like, is that you could ship just your app and the app icon, so they have something to click, then the React Native kernel, and then an IP address to SydJS.com, right? And just ship that. You haven't shipped the app, you've just shipped React Native. And as soon as they open it, it'll fetch it, and it's just like a web request. It'll pull down that JavaScript and load everything you've seen now. And if you need to push updates, you don't have to go through the App Store. You don't have to release a new update unless React Native wants an update to support picture tag. You can just keep reloading your server, and it will keep fetching that and making and updating the app for them. So all you have to do is uncomment this and comment this and Command R, and it'll just work. So does that answer your question?
What about droids?
What about droids?
Doesn't it support Android?
Cool, yeah. I'm glad there's one guy. You asked Windows things earlier and now Android. You're awesome. So there are... No, it's good. It's good. No, diversity is important. So we have... they have been working on that. It's a lot more complicated because it doesn't. Android doesn't ship with a JavaScript runtime. So iOS has JavaScript core, but there's nothing in here. So they're actually making their own JavaScript browser, if you will, like a runtime, like a V8, but lightweight enough to run only what they need. And then also they're just trying to make those bridges that they've made in iOS. So their designers are kind of heavily iOS, so they've kind of delivered there first. But funny enough that they'd already written component kit first for iOS as well, and they hadn't really written that for Android. So it doesn't run on Android yet, is because I'm really good at answering your questions. But but the code, the idea is that the code should be abstract enough that it should run. Is probably. That your components and the idea of this row here should look the same on Android, but maybe this navigation bar should be written in a slightly different way. The abstraction on the higher levels of navigation and everything unique to Android, unique, not bad, unique about Android, you can do on those interfaces. So, and no one asked about Windows Phone, but that's not Facebook's priority.
It's going to give us 6 months, so we're expecting it late this year.
Cool. So we're expecting it late this year, apparently. Any other questions?
He even responds to questions by answering the question so the audience can hear it. And he's only been doing this for 4 months, you say?
Oh.
They said give us 6 months when asked about it.
I'm more impressed with him doing this stuff for 4 months. Don't worry about React doing stuff in 6 months. Put him in React and see what happens in 6 months' time. We'll all be out of a job. We'll be smiling, though.
Yeah.
We'll be out of a job.
And I'll have photos to prove it. So apparently Android 4 months. Apparently, allegedly. Any other things?
Can we please thank Rob for...
Yeah, thank you.